Back for another episode of Master This. Today we're continuing to talk about perfectionism. Last week we talked about basically what it was. There we talk about how it shows up both where in our life, some thoughts and behaviors that you might recognize as you're starting to take part in perfectionism. I can say for me, and I assume for Adi, we both suffered from perfectionism for a lot of our lives. We're going to be sharing a little bit of our own stories too as we go on. So Adi, you want to kick us off? How does perfectionism show up in people? Where does it happen?
So it perfectionism usually shows up in kind of like an overarching way. It's most people when they have that kind of trait, that way of dealing, it's going to come out in many different facets of life. So it's important to start paying attention. Some of the things that might clue you that you are a perfectionist, you have that trait, is that you might be very, very critical. And that's one side of the mirror. And the mirror of that is becoming very defensive. So the criticism might be directed toward others or toward the self. And the defensiveness, which might look like an attack sometimes, especially if it's about defensiveness about criticism or feedback, is trying to push away anything that isn't perfect. Moments where you were not perfect or when others were not perfect, trying to step away from the uncomfortable feeling that that would bring up for you. You might be somebody who finds faults in yourself and in others. And another clue that will let you know that this is what's going on for you is you will be rigid and static. It'll be very hard for you to flex, to change, to learn from mistakes. You have to get it right the first time. And that would cause you to not start and not finish a lot of tasks. It'll be really, really hard to start things because the conditions have to be perfect. You have to feel perfect. You must have everything in the right position because you have to succeed. A fear of failure is driving this. And it will be hard to continue because every little feedback, either from the self that you might need to change or from others, might make you feel so uncomfortable that you would want to withdraw altogether. And that will come to play with family, with friends, in romantic connections, at work. Would you like to give some examples or any thoughts that came up, Mark?
I think as you're for me, I used to have a lot of anxiety. I can say through a lot of work with therapy as well as I actually cured my anxiety. It's insane. But one thing I used to really be anxious about was just perfectionism. I remember spending, and some of you listening might have this, comment if you do, significant amounts of time. I'm talking like hours, replaying the day, replaying conversations, being like, especially with women, when I was trying to find a partner, like, oh, if only I said this, or only I said that, or what if I did this, or oh my god, I can't believe I picked something out of my tooth during that time, and it would just be, it'd feel almost out of control. It'd be incessant. How much time I spent replaying essentially what happened, and what you're talking about is something. Therapy. My therapist is that I was living in I was living with this weird fantasy version of myself that I was constantly to, and I'm never going to be that guy. Right? I'm never going to be that guy. In fact, my perfectionism was preventing me from even stepping towards. And the idea here is that, one thing to know if you're perfectionist is having a lot of that anxiety, which can sometimes, this is the kind of a switch that we see a lot in our field, turn into depression. People that are constantly anxious, constantly afraid, end up getting depressed because they end up not doing happier things fuel them, and it generates a lot of shame. So perfectionism generates all this shame because we're never going to be this idealized, perfect version of ourselves, and that can create this awful loop that leads to anxiety and depression. That was something that was definitely at the cause of some of my symptoms. Really having to let go of that perfect.
Yeah, when you have a perfect version of yourself and of other, you're going to take mistakes very personally in every area of life. So if you think of your work, because we try to help people be effective at their jobs a lot in these videos, are you overestimating the impact of every mistake you make, big or small? Do you think that minor events can cause really, really awful consequences for you professionally? If you have that reaction, then you are going to be so scared to take risks. and you won't be able to learn from the mistakes you made. You will be thrown for a loop. And you might be frantically trying to fix a mistake. And by that, exposing yourself even more, or presenting an image that you don't want to present, and then feeling even more humiliated and ashamed. Humiliation, shame, and guilt are wrapped into this perfectionism. So what you said, like, why did I clean my tooth with that toothpick? Is this woman ever gonna like me? It's like this minor thing becomes a huge thing in your head, and then you might behave in ways that will create a self-fulfilling prophecy. Perfectionism means that you are so scared. You're operating from a place of fear, not from a place of desire, curiosity, acceptance. You are trying to prevent something from happening rather than get something to happen. So at work, I think one of the things that it's important to pay attention to is, what are you trying to avoid, or are you trying to approach? A perfectionist is trying to avoid things, and a realist is trying to approach. What can I do? What can I get? What's the road to somewhere? Without that much heavy burden of, if I make a mistake, if I fail, it's just going to be the end. Also, try to pay attention if you are very preoccupied when other people fail, when they don't get it right, when your romantic partner doesn't get it right. Do you make a check for yourself if a colleague doesn't get it right? Because as a perfectionist, perfectionism is about hierarchy. So does that restore your place in the hierarchy? And again, it's manageable. Mark and I will talk about it in the next few weeks and see also how to address it. Those are signs that will let you know that you might be operating under that kind of umbrella of avoiding failure, being very averse to risk, and trying to avoid something rather than to approach.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really great way of looking. I liked how you highlighted the fear. You know, Adi and I talk about mindfulness all the time during. I think a mindfulness practice can be really critical during this to see how much fear is, operating underneath. You can notice that if you're, short of breath, or your heart's beating very fast, or you have thoughts of what might go wrong. Um, Oftentimes, at least I know for me, I confused fear with excitement, or I confused fear with, I don't know, intensity or with passion. But really, I was running. I was running away, and I was faking, and I get something done at the last minute. We talked about procrastination, and procrastination is really common. So we hope that these were some helpful tips to know when you're experiencing perfectionism. We'd love to hear your stories, love to hear anything that you say. We said for you, and if we missed anything, please let us know. If there's any other symptoms that you've experienced or that has some experience. So we'll be back in the next couple of weeks. We're gonna see any final words.
Yeah, just I would love to hear the stories and maybe kind of hear from you. Are there some times where you can't enjoy your success? Are there some times where you procrastinate a lot? Are you not enjoying the road to wherever you're going? Those kind of stories, maybe if somebody has a personal story, we can definitely take some interest in that and also use it to understand what people need from these videos.
Totally. Well, take care, everybody, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. Bye.